Chapter 1. Rubbing my freezing hands nervously, I tucked them inside the pockets of my oversized sweater, clenching the soft wool in my whitening knuckles, holding them close to my dropping stomach before taking them out once again to wrap them around my profusely shivering self. A cool gust of early winter wind suddenly swooshed past me, fluffing through the fabric of my clothes, making me clench the flesh on my arm with an even tighter grip. My jabbing fingers were close to cracking open my skin, drawing blood to mar the white of my sweater in an ominous scarlet tinge. It's okay. It's fine. Mumbling to myself in a low voice, I slowly let go of my reddening arm, trying my best to keep my eyes cast down on the firm concrete that I had felt under my soul after a whole year. The familiar sight in front of my eyes was much more unwelcoming than any other place I had ever been to before. I could hear hushed voices, pointing fingers, wandering gazes, all directed at me. Some subtle, some not so subtle. They were talking about me. I knew it, and I knew what they were talking about as well. The crazy girl had returned to her hometown. Hometown! The word left a bitter inside my mouth. This was no home of mine. It was my personal living hell. There was no spot on earth that I despised more than this town delights. Ah! A sour look washed over my face, followed closely by a mocking smile as I started laughing silently to myself at the irony of the situation. The town's existence in my life was in complete opposite to its name. It was anything but delightful in my memories. All this town had ever given me was raw pain. Its mere name was enough to send shivers down my spine, yet here I was roaming the streets of the most hated place on my list, delights, on the most hated night in my calendar, Halloween. Suddenly, a small herd of children dressed in a colorful variety of ghouls, skeletons, and blanket ghosts ran past me, the chain from one of their costumes lightly hitting my jeans-clad knee, halting my thoughts as I flinched impulsively from the unexpected impact. Arg, shit! I was barely able to suppress my scream, but covering it up with a cuss word didn't seem like a wise choice in the heat of the moment, as a mother passing by me hurriedly placed her hands on her little boy's ears while throwing dirty looks at me at the same time. Sorry. Murmuring a half-hearted sorry, I started taking longer strides, trying to put as much distance between me and the angry mother as possible. I was in no mood for a lecture or confrontation. Something much bigger was awaiting me, something much more sinister. Ugh! As soon as I turned the corner, out of that woman's hearing range, I leaned my back against a tree, sliding slowly down the rough bark while letting out a loud groan. Why do I have to apologize for something I had no control over? Lifting one of my trembling hands, I pulled the hair tie out of my raven locks, letting several wavy tendrils frame my oval face, forming a temporary shield between me and the world I had no desire to face at the moment. The street I had stopped in was rather less populated, small number of houses, and even lesser people were present there yet. Those few visages, some familiar, some unfamiliar, who had witnessed my mini breakdown, didn't forget to give me weird looks as they passed by my heaving, crouched figure. None of them asked me whether I was doing fine or not. They never did. They just looked and judged. In their minds, the reason behind my panicking seemed to be a very minor one. At first, they had ignored it as a child's attempts at seeking attention. But as more and more time passed, the expression in their eyes changed from indifference to revulsion. They considered me as the crazy girl who had episodes of hysteria on every Halloween. The crazy girl who, even after graduating and leaving them all behind for good, kept returning to them on the 31st of every October. The crazy girl who, instead of going home to visit her parents, ran across the streets of the town at midnight. Crazy girl. God knows how much time passed before I lifted my head, passing a hand through my wild hair to swipe them away from hindering my vision. I had randomly settled down in the corner of the desolate street, but now that I looked closely, I found myself blocking the path to the house in front of me. A trail of wickedly smiling pumpkins was lining both sides of the track leading to their fancy porch. An abrupt urge to kick and tear every pumpkin appearing in my sight hit me out of nowhere, making me take a step back. I wanted to laugh out loud at my helplessness, but that would have only resulted in strengthening the onlooker's belief in the tale behind my madness. I hated this. I hated their stares. I hated their guts. They thought they knew it all when in reality, they knew nothing. They hadn't encountered once what I had been encountering on this ominous night every single year. They hadn't seen what I had. They hadn't seen him. Hysteria. Just his name was enough to tear the strings of my sanity into a tattered, tangled mess. I remembered seeing him for the first time when I, a 6-year-old, went trick-or-treating with the neighborhood kids. I wished I could call them friends, but I couldn't. They changed. Everything did after he appeared in my life, turning it upside down with his mere presence that could only be felt and seen by me, a curse of the worst kind. I remembered those amber eyes staring at me, following me as I went from door to door, too engulfed in my bag full of candies to be aware of the dangers lurking in the dimly lit streets of this dreadful town. I remembered being left behind by the other kids while I searched for my favorite chocolate bar that I had accidentally dropped somewhere on my way. I remembered crying in the middle of a deserted street after the relentless search for my little companions had left my small body tired to the bone. That is when I first saw him, a head full of jet-black locks appearing suddenly in my vision. Head hung low as a pair of awfully pale yet big slender hands tied my dirtied shoelaces that had somehow gotten undone during my aimless wandering. Good girls shouldn't cry. Those were his first words to me, a beautiful melody fluttering its way through the thick, foggy air surrounding us to reach my small ears concealed by the red hood hanging over my head. Yes, I was Little Red Riding Hood, and I had just met my big bad wolf. Why? My mother had drilled a fair share of information regarding talking to uncanny strangers inside my head, but one look at those amber eyes had caused all the reasoning my little brain possessed to abandon me immediately, because big bad wolves love it. Even though he had lifted his head to stare directly into my eyes, I couldn't see his face. His skin was concealed by a combination of black and white paint. The base was provided by a chalky white color, on top of which black markings were used quite intricately to cover the area around his eyes, the tip of his straight nose, and the hollow portion of his cheeks to give them a sunken appearance. Moreover, similar inky lines were smeared across his lips to illustrate a set of straight, pearly white teeth on them, much like that of a skull's. It was one thick layer of paint, but it could do nothing to hide the man's beauty. He was a looker, especially his eyes. The black paint surrounding them had made the amber pop out more in contrast. I couldn't move my gaze away from those glimmering amber, even if I tried. Are you a big bad wolf too? A small chuckle followed my innocent question, soon turning into a full-blown laughter that should have sent cold chills through my body. Yet I remained unaffected, staring expectantly at him, awaiting his response. Oh, darling, I'm the worst of them all. Pouting slightly, I looked down at my black shoes, gazing longingly at the neatly tied pair of shoelaces. But you just tied my laces. You helped me. His uncontrolled laughter was suddenly brought to a halt as my meek voice found its way out of lips hanging in the air between us. Maybe I was just helping myself. In a blink, the man's face had come dangerously close to me, turning my little self's doe eyes to widen than they already were as I let go of the wicker basket, unintentionally regretting it the moment it happened. I was going to lose more of my candies, but to my surprise, the thudding sound never came. He had stopped it from falling in time. Here, if possible, my eyes seemed to have increased twice in size, looking at the small basket barely able to hold the overflowing candies. My ogling stopped as my stunned gaze landed on the similar, shiny red packet of my favorite chocolate, along with all these new delicacies that hadn't been there previously. They left you, darling, but I never will. And he had kept his word. That night, he had crept his way inside my childish heart. I had become fairly comfortable around the strange man, letting him take me back home, and he did that too. But the trance eventually shattered when I stood there waving enthusiastically, and my mother asked who I was waving off. "Mommy, can't you see the nice man with yellow eyes?" Imagine my surprise when my mother hurriedly grabbed my arm, tugging me inside the door as she frantically stared around the empty patio. "Sweetie, there's no man there." She couldn't see what I was seeing. Peeking my head out from the warm stuff of her wool sweater, I rubbed my eyes before squinting them again, but the scene before my eyes still hadn't changed. I was clearly able to see the man standing right in front of our door, staring down at me with devilish amber eyes as a snake-like voice found its way towards my huddled figure. Hysteria. Everything following that night was a big, dark blur, a black hole in which I was still trapped, hopelessly trying to find a way out. But the more I tried to crawl out, the more it sucked me right back into it. The next day, there were rumors of me talking to an invisible person in the neighborhood. They had seen me talking to thin air, walking hand in hand with nothing but space. Parents started murmuring about me. Their children began to avoid me. Nothing remained the same. Nothing except for him. Just as he had said, he came to visit me on every Halloween. At first, he'd just remain in the shadows, a silhouette sitting in the rocking chair of our lounge, a dark shadow lying behind me on the bed, amber eyes staring at me through the half-parted doors of my closet. He never said anything. He just stared. He knew no one believed me. He knew I was all alone. He knew I was scared senseless of him, and he enjoyed every bit of it. He fed on it, fed on my hysteria. As the years passed, his tactics became more severe as well. He'd take forms of several other creatures that had been added to my scares me to death list over the time. He loved scaring me. Sometimes I could hear him laugh through the blur of my ear-piercing shrieks. Bastard relished my torment. I had thought that once I left the town, this would all stop, yet it didn't. After graduation, I had moved out to the city. I had mustered courage to go to my first Halloween party, yet all my efforts to socialize went straight down the drain when I witnessed the boy sitting next to me on the table, decomposing like a freaking corpse right before my eyes. A patch of skin from his left cheek, falling straight down my blouse, broke down the last piece of my resolve, making me throw a glass of punch at him as I ran out of there screaming like my tail was on fire. I had once again become the outcast. Everyone had left me, yet he didn't. Hysteria stayed with me. 2 years had passed since then. 2 years since I started coming back to Delight's every Halloween. People here had already labeled me as the crazy chick. It was better wandering here than making breaking news on different local news channels every year. I was well familiar with these streets. I knew my way around. I preferred roaming here to staying locked in my small apartment where there was never much room to escape or hide. I liked it this way. I felt free, and I knew for a fact that he preferred things in the similar manner. Hunt thrilled him more than the hunted. Bastard! Rubbing my arms furiously in a failed attempt to calm my jittery nerves, I turned another corner, reaching a bustling street swarmed with several groups of grotesquely dressed people. Great! I was scared of crowds more than the desolate areas. Contrary to the old belief that evil things become more active in an inhabited place, Hysteria loved tormenting me in throng. It was his way of telling me that there was no escaping him. Nothing was going to stand between me and him. Hey, pretty lady, how about coming to our carnival? I'll even let you take a picture with the killer clown. A hideously dressed man halted my train of thoughts by suddenly appearing in front of me, thrusting a colorful pamphlet in my hands, the force of it making me almost fall back down on my butt. Ow! Letting the strange paper fall out of my hold, my hands immediately extended themselves in front of me in a defending position as I stared at the man with a guarded look in my gray, hunted eyes, traveling up and down his built, scrutinizing him from head to toe. Clad in a colorful attire consisting of a red and blue silk shirt over a bright yellow pair of baggy pants, the clown stood smiling in front of me, adjusting the smeared fake blood on his chalk-white cheek, while his scarlet-tinged wig was threatening to fall down his head any moment. Not a clown, please. Abruptly, the man lifted the Polaroid camera that he had been gripping in his other hand, almost shoving it in front of my face. How about a picture, ma'am? Is he kidding me? No, thank you. Getting the words out of my gritted teeth, I tried sidestepping the clown only for him to block my way yet again. Just one picture, ma'am. I wanted to hit the man for annoying me in such a critical situation, but at the same time, I couldn't find it in myself to lash out at him for something he wasn't even responsible for. I can't behave in the same unfair manner with him that I myself have been experiencing for years. Peering over his shoulder, I could see that more and more people had started looking our way, most of them waiting for me to provide them with an interesting show, something to gossip about on dinner table for the upcoming nights. Okay, great. Just let me do a test take first. Please, just get it over with. Huffing out a frustrated sigh, I wrapped my arms in front of myself, glaring daggers straight at the camera's lens until my eyes got blinded momentarily by a flashing light followed closely by the soft click of the shutter. Oh God! What now? Pausing midway while rubbing my eyes with the back of my hand, I let a frown take over my expressions as I walked closer to the phony killer clown. He was holding out a Polaroid picture in front of me. Looking at him distrustfully, I carefully took the picture out of the man's hand, but as soon as I looked at the picture, my tight grip on its crumpled corner suddenly faltered, letting it slowly fall down to the ground, on top of the radiant leaflet already lying down on the pavement. You aren't in the picture. He was right. The dirt-ridden picture, lying silently on the asphalt near my feet, was mocking me while displaying the scenario of a bustling street painted across its white surface, devoid of any raven-haired girl glaring through it. I was nowhere to be seen in it. What the hell? I had no idea why, but the clown had suddenly taken out his phone and had flipped open its front camera, pointing it towards both of us. His frenzied voice had urged me to look up at him first, and then follow his eyes to see what had gotten him this terrified. My breath got caught in my throat the moment my eyes settled on the illuminated screen of the phone. The clown could be seen standing at the same point, right next to me, yet I was not present at the scene being shown in his camera. There was only him in the video, not me. No. Is this a part of Hysteria's sick games? I could feel my throat tightening once my brain processed what was happening around me. My jittery nerves had turned into a big blob of nervous wreck, making my heart sink into a pit of dark, bottomless pit. My trembling hands had left my sides, crawling over my shoulders to reach my neck, scratching at my throat to somehow help it let the trapped air out, yet only gasping sounds came out of my semi-parted lips. I was scared beyond words, with only one thought in my mind. It has started. Hey, are you all right? Ma'am, I was just pranking you. It was only a harmless publicity stunt. See, the video is pre-recorded. Look. The clown's worried face covered my whole vision as he leaned down in front of my hunched figure before practically thrusting his phone in my face. He was hastily tapping the screen of his phone, showing me the continuously appearing and disappearing sign of a big round pause button occupying the bottom of the screen. Prank. Like the cool autumn breeze sweeping the dead leaves off of the ground, the clown's panic-stricken voice slowly brushed my hysteria away, revealing the reality of the situation to me. You're unbelievable. The first thing I did after finding my voice back was loudly scream in his face as I pushed him back with both of my hands, crawling back, away from him on all fours. Relax, ma'am. I didn't mean to scare you. I've done this prank to others as well. Holding up his hands in air, the clown looked around at the small crowd that had formed around us, drawing my attention to the herd of furiously whispering people as well. Looks like they've got their dinner table gossip. Tears were threatening to spill from my brimming eyes as I placed my grazed hands on the asphalt, making them hurt more in the process as I used them to support my weight while I stood up. No one else came forward to help me. As usual, dusting the dirt clinging to my clothes, I turned my back to the stiff clown, busy frowning at me as if he were berating me with his eyes for my overreacting. Fuck you. I could see something snap inside of him the moment I said, but I couldn't care less. Leaving him and the crowd gawking behind me at my audacious behavior, I started taking large strides, my feet lightly patting against the firm concrete, trying to hurriedly reach the other side of the road. Just as I was about to enter a new street, I looked back once again at the dispersing crowd. None of them had stayed around to look at the lone tear leaking out of the corner of my eye. Why do I create these scenes everywhere I go? Why do I have to get scared of every little thing? Why can't I just have a normal life like everybody else? Numerous questions were swarming my throbbing head, making me crouch against the wall of the deserted street I had been occupying previously. Drawing my knees close to my heaving chest, I wrapped both of my arms around my weak legs, burying my head in it to muffle the sobs racking through my body. Why? I couldn't help shouting out my frustration, making my voice resound through the empty alleyway. Darling, didn't I tell you this before? Good girls shouldn't cry. The familiar voice joining after me in the desolate place seemed to have knocked the breath out of me, causing my head to shot up immediately in the pursuit of the speaker. It's not him. He hasn't talked to me for almost 15 years. I could vaguely see a tall, imposing silhouette standing at the end of the alleyway. His head was hanging low towards the ground, but after a moment or two, he slowly raised his head to face my crouched figure on the other side of the street. I couldn't see his face, but the pair of ambers set on me in that moment clearly told me that my worst fear had no doubt come to life. Because, no, big bad wolves love it. My name is Gia Wilson, and this is the story of my hysteria. Chapter 2. Big bad wolves love it. Continuing to lurk in the far shadows, his silhouette had uttered the sentence from quite a distance, yet the wind carrying his words to me made it appear like a hushed whisper, teasing the skin behind my earlobe, resembling that of a lover's chaste kiss. No. Placing my hand behind the wall I had been leaning against, I hurriedly stood up. My legs felt weak, refusing to support my weight completely. It had gotten difficult to breathe normally, causing me to resort towards my gaping mouth for assistance. No. Slumped against the brick wall, panting heavily as my breasts heaved up and down rapidly, repeating the same word again and again like some broken record, I appeared as a total wreck. Yes, darling. Yes. My lips contorted into a disgusted grimace, hearing the abhorring endearment coming out of the vile creature's mouth. Don't look at me like that, darling. Didn't you miss hearing my voice? I hate you. Having been trapped inside my squirming insides for more than a decade, the sentence, although whispered out in a much less than compressed manner, had finally found a way out. I had wanted to say it out loud sooner, but he had never given me the chance. He never interacted with me apart from when he had tied my shoelaces and took me back home, which seemed to be the only exception to his no-talking rule. Now, you're making my heart ache, darling. Is this how you talk to someone who never left your side through all these difficult years? I could hear a tinge of mischief in his teasing tone, causing my blood to boil, despite the constant shivers of fear that were washing all over my body. Who made these years difficult in the first place? Maybe the years of emotional torture had finally gotten to my head. Him materializing in front of me in a normal, approachable form had definitely played a big role in turning me this bold. I felt less scared, or maybe I had just become crazier than before. Oh, my little darling has finally found a spine. Before I could even bat an eyelash, he had crossed the distance between us, his hazy outline transforming into a full-built man right before my eyes. I didn't even have the time to step away until it was too late. My feeble face was already clutched in his powerful grasp. I closed my eyes immediately, awaiting an unnatural blow to land and destroy my already wrecked body, but it never came. Huh? My eyes opened on their own accord when I felt him squishing my cheeks with his big hands. Want me to take it out for you? He was talking about my spine. Clenching my teeth, I tried to give him the best look of hatred that I could muster, but the second my eyes locked onto his, a trance resembling a slithering serpent rapidly crawled over my frozen body, curling around it in mere seconds, until there was no hope left for me. The serpent was hissing this reality in my ears. He had returned, and he was close, too close for my liking. In spite of my will, my eyes started traveling over his features, drinking the sharp edges of his jawline, lingering over his plump, pale lips, nestled perfectly under a straight nose. His face was yet again covered in a beautifully drawn skull makeup. Similar to how a mural added more charm to a wall, the paint only made his beautiful features pop out more, especially his eyes. His eyes seemed like a pair of burning embers buried deep under a coal mine, pulling me with a magnetic force, drawing me in like the teasing twirls of fire, inciting the defenseless moth towards its demise. "Don't stare too much, darling. You're making me all shy." His teasing voice suddenly broke through the trance, surrounding my mind in a hazy mess, causing me to hurriedly avert my gaze from his face. "Isn't my darling going to greet me with a sweet kiss?" "Fuck you." I had let the words out without fully processing them, much like a reflex action. Only after it was said out loud did I realize my mistake. All the ways he could torture me through the night started playing before my eyes, stopping only when I heard him let out a little chuckle. "Yeah, that too. But let's start with a kiss." I could feel myself nearing a mental breakdown. His sudden friendliness was messing with my judgment, clouding my better senses. Yet nothing seemed to be enough to erase the damage his presence had inflicted upon my memories. He had scarred me for life. "Leave me!" Not being able to handle his games, I shoved his hands away from my face, taking several steps away from him. A sudden blank look washed over his face, wiping every trace of emotion off of it. I couldn't judge what was going through his head. His eyes looked dead. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing except for air came out. I was afraid of him turning back into the monster from my deepest, darkest nightmares. Impulsively, I cowered back in fear as I watched the skull-painted face lowering down in front of me, staring me dead in the eye before peeling back his lips to let out a loud, booming laughter, eventually breaking into a fit of hysterics. "Why?" His emotional instability was puzzling me. "Why are you doing this?" Not paying any heed to my question, he continued laughing like a madman, clutching his sides as if they were going to burst open any moment. "Answer me." In the matter of a blink, his tall figure was looming over me, gripping my throat in a grasp that didn't seem to cut my oxygen supply, but at the same time, it rendered me unable to pry myself out of it. "That's how I like your eyes, filled with fear." I glared at him with contempt as a lone tear betrayed me, finding an opening to hurriedly slide out of the cage of my eyes. His eyes seemed to be following it closely. "Just kidding. Did I scare you for real?" In a swift motion, he had let go of my throat. Why? I had no idea how I had become so bold to keep pushing his buttons, hoping for him to give in, one way or another. But I knew one thing for sure. I was not going down without getting the truth out of him. I needed to know. I deserved to know. "Why? Because I love you, Gia." "What?" My eyes were about to pop out of my skull and fall onto the ground as I continued staring dumbfounded at the man in front of me. Hearing him say my name after so long, especially in such a sentence, had knocked the breath out of me. He, on the other hand, seemed quite normal. His lips were stretched into a sweet grin as he peered down at me with a soft look in his eyes, which only lingered there for a mere second before disappearing altogether. "Did you believe me? Poor soul, must be starving for love after all these tough years." The sweet smile had wasted no moment in turning into a cynical grin. How could I believe him for even a second? Tears collecting in my brimming eyes were threatening to spill as I glared up at him through the shadow of my eyelashes, watching his grin slowly falter until it was reduced to a straight line. "I want my soul back." A frown formed across my forehead, following his uncanny reply, deepening more as I saw him raising a hand to my face. Flinching, I tried to move back, but he had already sensed my intention as he gave me a warning look daring me to move away from him. I knew what that look meant. I had seen it all too many times, tried rebelling against it more so, and I had failed miserably every single time. Hysteria always got what he wanted. Good girl. He was smoothing the ridges formed between my brows with the pad of his thumb. Unlike him, his skin felt like a warm ray of sun on a cold winter morning. I hated feeling this way. I hated that in many years the first hand raised to genuinely comfort me was his. You remember meeting me when you were 6, darling? Yes. I had no idea why my voice had come out in a breathless pant. Well, that was not the first time we met. Our first encounter happened when you were 3. You had just arrived in Delights with your parents. His fingers continued stroking the skin underneath my brows, despite the fact that my frowns had long disappeared. It was now replaced by a surprised look. They were busy renovating the house, leaving you to play all alone in the backyard. Do you remember finding a red object there, glinting under the root of a tree? Of course you don't. You were a stupid baby busy doing stupid stuff. Pausing for a small moment, he diverted the conversation to slip in another one of his silly remarks. What's with the obsession with red color, by the way? Red crystals, red candies, red lingerie. A lopsided smile was pulling at one corner of his chalk-white lips, while my own jaw was close to hitting the floor. Back to the point, do you know what you did? You put the damn thing in your mouth. Do you know what it was? It was the last part of my soul that I had been searching for a long, long time. The series of asking rhetorical questions and answering them himself went on for a little while, before the smile gracing his lips suddenly dropped from his lips. His fingers stopped their mindless caressing as well. He was slowly leaning into me, and he continued to do so until the tip of our noses were touching. Do you have any idea how long it took me to find all scattered pieces of my soul? Centuries. The old coot who had did this to me in order to suppress my rising powers had long died by then. His constant switching between playful and intimidating tones was unnerving me. There was no way of obtaining the crystal except for tearing it out of your body, which I should gladly mention that I was about to do until a very daring 3-year-old asked me to be her companion, as her dad was accompanying her mother, and she had no one to play. Innocent child didn't know he was probably busy banging her against every piece of furniture he could find. What the? Shh. It is rude interrupting someone when they're talking. His rigid fingers had found life again as they traveled down towards my lips, covering them with their burning tips. Surprisingly, my greedy little darling here wasn't full even after eating part of my soul. She wanted more. Precisely. She wanted to keep poking my eyes until one of them eventually fell out of its socket just because they were such a prettier hue of sunlight. Is he telling the truth? One thing about Hysteria was that you could never completely trust him. Never. I found you interesting, so I decided to keep you. 18 years, darling. 18 years. It took a period of whole 18 years for my soul to become a part of your body. And in spite of being the owner, I guarded your petty existence for these 18 years, just so another creature won't end up claiming my powers hidden inside of you. You're lying. You tormented me. You scared me for your personal amusement. You turned me into the crazy girl who returns to the town every Halloween. It's better than becoming the dead girl whose body was found on Halloween, no? Pushing his hands away from my face, I stared at him with contempt, pouring out of every single word of mine. Everything is just a joke for you, my life being the same, isn't it? I'd have killed you if that had been the case, darling. His nonchalant tone was driving me insane, much more insane than the people around me already claimed me to be. Digging my nails inside the skin of my arm, I tried my best to avoid making eye contact with him. I had no idea how long I stayed there, trying to tear my skin off, only stopping when I felt a pair of arms wrap around my stiff shoulders. I would have jumped out with surprise if it hadn't been for the ironclad grip keeping me rigid in my place. It wasn't me. My squirming toned down when the familiar voice blew a few strands of hair away from my cheek as his warm breath caressed the exposed skin of my neck. Huh? The scary figures. It wasn't me. It was the other creatures trying to obtain my soul out of you. Liar. I saw your eyes. They were everywhere. His hold on me tightened as I felt his rugged cheek coming into contact with my own soft one, rubbing them ever so lightly against each other. I was protecting you from them. Then why didn't you say so? Turning my head away from his touch, I kept my eyes glued to the dimly lit lamppost, standing tall at some distance away from us. Because I couldn't afford you running over to some church. Couldn't have another showdown with a priest. Now could we? They'd have killed you first. What? His sudden disclosure had caused to whirl around in his arms. Why me? What did I do? I watched as he lifted his long, slender fingers, tracing my cheekbone with the back of his hand, before slowly tucking some of the loose strands of hair behind my ear. You have my soul inside you, darling. You are tainted in their eyes, an abomination. Tears started gathering once again into the reddened rims of my gray eyes as his words finally registered inside my mind. There was no escape for me. I could never ever escape this cycle. I could never escape hysteria. I didn't ask for this. Did you see me rooting for it? Yet here I am, stuck helping the little crazy girl who returns to the town every Halloween. He was mocking me with my own words. Leave me. I don't want your help. Placing my hands on his chest, I applied as much pressure as I could, but I failed to even make him move an inch. You can't survive without my help, darling, especially on Halloween when their strength is at its peak. His large hands had engulfed my small ones, resting on top of his rock-hard chest. Trying to sneak some feel, darling? Oh, shut up, is what I wanted to say, but the fear lessened due to his amiable interaction hadn't taken me so high where I would end up forgetting my place. I was a human, after all. I knew I couldn't win against him in matters of power. And mind games, I didn't stand a chance there either. He was Hysteria, the king of deception. How about making a deal with me, Gia? Deal? The serious tone his bemused voice had suddenly taken caused me to peer up at him with furrowed eyebrows. Yes, a deal. Gulping inaudibly, I continued staring up at him, motioning with him my desperate gaze to continue speaking. For the whole night, I wouldn't protect you. If you're able to protect yourself from the numerous entities lurking in every corner of the town, ready to pounce on you any moment, I'll leave you alone. But if you fail in doing so, you'll have to pay for it with your life. The serious air surrounding abruptly disappeared as he gave me a big grin, showing me a set of perfectly aligned, pearly white teeth. Unless, of course, you ask for my help. 3 helplines you have. If you ask me to help you for the 3rd time. He paused for a mere moment, reducing the grin to a small tilted smirk as he stared at me with a set of glimmering amber eyes. You'll be mine. With that, his body turned into a big cluster of several black butterflies, causing me to let out a loud scream from the sudden shock. Run, darling, run! He had disappeared from my sight, yet his booming voice continued echoing around the deathly still surroundings, making my blood turn cold. Chapter 3? Was he telling the truth? That was the only query dominating my frenetic thoughts, circulating inside my head as I crawled my way out of the desolate street, holding one wall after another, supporting my weight that my own legs refused to carry on inanimate objects. Was he really protecting me? Was there really someone who was worried about me all along? Leaning my head against the rough bricks, I looked up at the inky sky with a desperate gaze. Even the celestial bodies seemed to have abandoned me. It was a moonless night, and despite it being a town famous for its beautiful farms and clear skies, the murkiness created by some wandering clouds had shadowed the smaller stars, turning the heavens above my head into a big, scary black hole, painting a similar picture to that of my life since childhood. A big, meaningless smudge, holding the power to engulf my insignificant existence any moment. The only source of light guiding me through the sea of blackness was a single lamppost located at the far end of the street, casting a dull yellowish glow on my hazy surroundings, providing enough light for me to pave my way out of there. The scary figures, it wasn't me. It was the other creatures trying to obtain my soul out of you. Hysteria's voice was still ringing inside my head, making me turn my head side to side, every other moment in fear of an unknown creature jumping at me out of nowhere. Every single horror I had faced in my life seemed to be playing in my mind like a reel, making me wonder what the portentous night had in store for me this time. It's okay. It's fine. Rubbing my sweaty palms on the rough surface of my washed jeans, I repeated the same words that my mother had told me when she had found me hidden inside the sink cabinet, covered in a mixture of my own vomit and sweat, screaming at her to get rid of the crawling doll. The urge to run towards my old house and snuggle into her warm arms was too strong, but I knew I couldn't do it. Not for the night, at least. Not since I saw a creature, imposing as my mom, slicing its own throat open with a wicked grin. A shudder passed through my body as I unknowingly recalled the awful memory. Mom. Heaving an exasperated sigh out, I tried directing my attention back towards my unusually quiet surroundings. I had gone through these streets before, yet the place appeared to be unnaturally silent. No sound could be heard, except for the crunching of my worn-out sneakers against the gravel as I tried to get towards the light source as fast as possible. Just some more steps. I was more or less 10 steps away from the street lamp, almost feeling relieved for having left the darkness behind, when a low groan reached my ears, turning me stiff in my place. It didn't sound like a pained groan. It was more of a grunt, similar to what I had heard 2 years ago on the night of my first Halloween party. No. My heart was hammering against my ribcage as my brain started playing images from that day before my eyes, flashing them in front of my vision one by one, making me recall the whole event when I had made a fool out of myself in front of the whole college. It was definitely the same sound which came out of that decomposing corpse's half-eaten lips when his decaying cheek had fallen just above my breasts. Oh God, please let it be a dream. Ugh. I had heard no footsteps, yet the sound seemed to have come closer. Ugh! I almost jumped out of my skin as I felt a cold breath fanning across the back of my neck. Cold sweat beads forming on my forehead had started trickling down my temples. My breath was coming out in short, erratic puffs of air, hurting my chest more with its unruly spasming. My condition had certainly worsened more than when I had first seen Hysteria. He's standing right behind me. Clenching my clattering teeth, I tried my best to keep my breathing in check as I slowly lifted my gaze rotating it sideways to steal a quick glance without turning my head completely. Don't be there. Don't be there. Just as my eyes settled on the heap of my own raven locks flowing down the tip of my shoulder, a festering head appeared out from behind my shoulder, scaring the daylights out of me. A loud scream tore out of the back of my throat as the head gave me a gruesome smile before falling off its neck, rolling over my shoulder, and eventually settling near my feet. I hadn't even been able to recover from the shock when a set of putrefying arms wrapped around my torso, trapping me in my place. Ah! Continuing to let out loud screams, I thrashed around wildly in the corpse's arms, trying desperately to break free. I was jabbing my elbows in its rotting ribs, scratching the already broken flesh into more shreds, yet the corpse's hold on me didn't seem to be getting any weaker. The new behavior had baffled me. These things, they tormented me, chased me, ran after me, but they never touched me. They had never physically harmed me before. Hysteria was telling the truth. These things didn't attack me before because of him. The mortifying realization was cut short as my frantic eyes settled on the head, lying face first on the gravel near my feet, suddenly started vibrating, producing weird buzzing sounds, whilst jerky movements kept getting worse and worse with time. It almost looked like the head would end up exploding any moment. HTHT. A creepy, high-pitched voice was coming out of the bobbling head, making my attempts to break free turn more frantic than before. Stop it! I knew there was no point in saying this, yet I couldn't succumb to their tactics completely. I felt too powerless, too human. Let me go. Abruptly, the arms holding me from behind crawled over my shoulder to reach up and grip my neck in a vice-like hold, before tackling me down to the ground with a sudden jerk. My spine collided with the rough asphalt, making stars appear in my vision. The disgusting creature hadn't shown any leniency to me. He had went all out in throwing me off balance, and the proof of it could be felt forming on the tender muscles of my back. What is happening? What the hell do I do? My berserk efforts at freeing myself abruptly came to a halt as I witnessed the head, which had been buzzing furiously, stop its frantic spasm, turning deathly still on the ground. It doesn't look so good. Slowly, the head came back to life as it rolled over to the other side, providing me with a clearer look of its face, which I had failed to see before. It had an eye gauged out of its empty socket. Its skin was covered in a dark black soot, appearing gangrenous, patches of it missing from place to place. Its decomposing lips were stretched into a crazed, triumphant smile, which seemed to get bigger and bigger in size. Bigger! That's when I realized that the head wasn't get big in literal sense. It had just started rolling closer to me. Hell! A loud cackle broke out of its lips as the head increased its speed, rolling over with more speed to hurriedly lessen the distance between us. Get away from me! Get away! My throat had turned raw from all the screaming I had been doing for the past few minutes. Some would think that while experiencing it for so many years, I should have learned some tricks by now, should have been prepared somehow, but no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. These creatures were always a step ahead of me. These creatures, which I had thought to be Hysteria's doing. Hysteria. Unexpectedly, his name had appeared to be like the first ray of sunshine at the end of a darkened night. Dawn of hope. No, I can't call him. I can't lose. The head had crept past my abdomen by now. Its decaying lips were directly resting above my heaving breasts. Art. Is it saying heart? Does it want my heart? A black-colored sticky liquid was dribbling out of its half-parted lips like saliva. I was anticipating it to stop near my ribcage, yet it continued rolling forward until its disgusting saliva was trickling down onto the pavement right beside my head. The rotting smell of death had filled my olfaction, making it almost impossible to keep breathing, getting hindered more so when I saw it nearing my lips. Why is it leaning down towards my mouth? I watched with my breath stuck as I saw it opening its mouth abnormally wide. The upper half of its face was almost hanging back like the lid of a trash bin, exposing its pointed charcoal teeth, their tip reflecting the light coming from the lamppost, glinting like the edge of a sword ready to sacrifice the goat at the altar. Hysteria! Everything happened in slow motion as I saw a shiny pair of black leather boots suddenly entering my peripheral vision, taking their sweet time and trudging towards me, whilst the cackling head, unaware of other presents who had decided to join us, kept nearing my face. Just as its teeth were about to land on my lips, one of the muscular legs, clad in a pair of black leather pants, raised up high before kicking the amputated head far away from face. The kick was so powerful I could see specks of dust, previously resting on the dirtied street, getting displaced all over in air. Missed me, darling? My watery eyes slid up the leather pants, trailing over a fitted tailcoat, its collar adorned by a white-colored ascot, resting directly beneath a skull-painted face, which was peering down at me with its familiarly burning amber eyes. A large puff of air that I didn't know I had been holding suddenly left my parted mouth as I closed my eyes for a moment, letting a series of hiccups wash over my writhing body. The corpse's hands were still holding me down, but I had become uncaring of it. The near-death experience had rattled my senses. The deceptive freak that I used to despise had turned into my solace at the time of need. Free me. What did you say, darling? Free me. He was clearly having the time of his life. Uh-huh. Everything comes with a price. What do you want? I had finally managed to keep my stammering under check. A kiss. He must have seen the baffled look on my face because of the way his lips stretched into a full-blown smile as he tilted his head, letting his shoulder-length jet black locks fall to one side before completing the rest of his sentence. To share the lost part of my soul with me. A cackling sound resounded through the empty streets, filled my vision with chilling scenario that I had encountered mere moments ago. My eyes wandered to the side to see the concrete beside my head laced with sooty saliva dribbling out of that thing's mouth. Its pungent odor was still lingering in the air. Tick-tock, tick-tock, Hysteria continued, looking down at me with his head tilted, while producing ticking sounds of a clock out of his mouth. Less staring, more work, darling. Someone's getting impatient. H-T-H, art. Hearing that ominous voice once again ringing through my ears made my skin crawl with disgust. Fuck. I told you it'll happen after the kiss. Hey, I just realized a word of your interest that also rhymes with talk. I didn't know I would ever be thinking this, but his meaningless chattering was still better than the corpse's weird noises. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see a dark circular blur rolling towards me with an unnatural speed, inching closer and closer with every moment I spent making my decision. I could see it leaving a black trail after it on the asphalt, as its multiple pointed teeth took turns in glinting under the dull glow coming from the lamppost. The creature was going to devour me. Tick-tock, hey, art, here, or art. Their unsynchronized voices had managed to produce an ear-shattering cacophony, wreaking havoc inside my jumbled mind. Hysteria had given me 3 chances, but the creature once it gets its hands on me, which ironically were already holding me in an ironclad hold, was not going to spare me. There were no second chances with the rotten corpse. Heart, heart. The deranged head had come extremely close to me. I could see it opening its disgusting mouth in advance, getting ready to pounce on me again. Fine. Good choice. A sudden whoosh of air accompanied his nonchalant remark before I saw a katana appearing in his hand out of thin air, slashing through the corpse's body before impaling the bobbling head with the sword's sharp tip. Right in front of my eyes, he held the impaled head close to his face, a sinister glimmer passing through his amber eyes for a small moment before he smashed it on the pavement, making black, gooey mess fly out in every direction. A lone eye landing right near my foot. Ah! Unbeknownst to me, a shriek found its way out my wide, hanging jaw, making me rapidly crawl away from the horrifying scene. Eyes on me, darling. Big, warm hands lightly touched my cheeks, turning my head away from the oozing eye lying near the place I was previously sprawled on. Who are you? My voice had yet again transformed in a stammering mess of words as I gawked at the man who had slashed the powerful demon with a mere blow. I hadn't been able to get out of the weak creature's hold. How am I to escape the clutches of this insanely powerful entity? Suddenly, a warm pad of a thumb rubbed the skin under my eyes, wiping the patches of transparent liquid flowing down my cheek, hindering my thought process, rendering me unable to reason anymore. A low voice was whispering something in my ear, but before my mind could comprehend the meaning behind those words, a pair of soft lips started tracing a path down to the corner of my trembling lips, covering them swiftly without any warning. I had expected the paint on his lips to taste like chalk, yet it didn't. The paint wasn't smearing my lips either. It almost felt like a part of his skin. His lips, on the other hand, they felt sweeter than any fruit I had ever consumed. His thumb and index finger was holding my chin in its place, guiding my face to suit his lips' chaste movements. Contrary to my expectation, his touch was way more gentle than his colorful personality. He was kissing my lips as if they were made of glass. The sweet torture of repeated small, hot pecks went on for some moments before he applied pressure on my chin, urging me to part my lips. And the moment I did, he slipped his hot tongue inside my drying mouth, claiming it as his own territory. Soon, another sensation started taking over my body as I felt him sucking something more than my tongue. I could feel him sucking something out of me. My body was getting weaker by the minute, and by the way he used his free arm to wrap around my waist, I could tell he was aware of my deteriorating condition as well. Just as I was steps away from losing my consciousness, he separated our perfectly joined lips before bending forward to carefully lie me down on the hard ground. Hovering over my face to give me one last look of his crazed smile, the man whispered the same words in my ear that he had before he had captured my mouth with his own. You know me, darling. I'm your Hysteria. Chapter 4. Something heavy was weighing me down, a mass resting on top of my chest. My limbs felt numb, devoid of any other sensation apart from thousands of insects crawling all over my body. It was too dark, too quiet. I tried peering my eyes open to inspect my condition, but the more force I applied to part my lids, the heavier they became. I could feel nothing apart from the mass pressing into my ribcage, which was gradually sliding down, creeping towards my abdomen. My sweater seemed to have ridden up in the process by the way my muscles clenched the moment they come into contact with the furry sensation. Furry? The realization seemed to have woken up my sleepy mind, causing me to sit up with a sudden jolt. A small yelp accompanied my abrupt movement, making me shift my widened eyes down, only to find a pair of yellow eyes looking up at me through the gap between my thighs. It was a small black kitten, which had been lying on top my torso and had fallen down on my legs due to my unannounced action. Rubbing the back of head with the side of my palm, I picked the kitten up with my left hand, looking around at the same time as I pushed my legs to stand up. As far as my sight allowed, I could only see a humongous sugarcane field surrounding me. How in hell did I end up here? Meow. The soft purring brought my attention back towards the small creature huddled in my palm, looking up at me with its cute little amber eyes. Wait, amber eyes? Hysteria? A slow Cheshire cat-like grin spread across the kitten's lips, taking over more than half of its small face, making me turn pale with the realization. I had heard that jinns can take forms of both humans and animals, but I had never witnessed it with my own eyes. Seeing it happen before me seemed to have rattled my brain. Is he a jinn? Just as I was about to look at the kitten closely, it jumped up towards my face, licking my lips with its slimy tongue before sprinting away without a look back. It took me a moment or two to recover from the shock. Hysteria was guarding my unconscious body in animal form, yet he was the one who had brought me here in the first place. And now that rascal had run away, leaving me alone in this unfamiliar place. "Come back here, you bastard! Take me out of here!" I shouted loudly in the direction the kitten had disappeared off to, hoping for some kind of cheeky reply to resonate through the dark. But only soft whooshing of air answered me back. "Fuck you!" Nothing. Is this your way of dumping me in a harder level? This is my life, not a game. I continued speaking gibberish, aiming to cajole a remark out of him, but still no sound was heard. Puffing my cheeks with frustration, I took my phone out of the back pocket of jeans, turning its flashlight on to cast some light on the murky fields encircling me. Nothing much was visible, except for the green leaves resting on top of tall stalks, sticking in every other direction. Cool night breeze passing through the crop would stir the deadly silence every other minute by rustling the tips of the elongated leaves, urging me to tighten my clutch on my phone impulsively as I continued looking side to side in order to avoid a repeat telecast of the night earlier. I need to get out of this maze, and I need something sharp to protect myself as well. Just thinking about something popping out of these fields had led me to break into a cold sweat. Trailing my free hand up the front of my sweater, I gripped its neck to pull it away from my body, trying to cool myself down somehow. But as time continued passing, the situation became more and more nerve-wracking, making it almost suffocating for me to keep wearing the sweater. Whatever. Pointing the flashlight down, I used my free hand to tug the sweater over my head, but the moment I closed my eyes to let my head out of the tiny neckline, a slurping sound pierced through the deafening silence, making me open my eyes immediately. What was that? Quickly removing the stuck sweater from my head, I rolled it in my arms, my hair scattering in every direction as I squinted my eyes trying to locate the source of the sound. But the only sound that could be heard was the soft rustling of sugarcane leaves. Am I hearing things now? Ruling it out as paranoia, I clicked my tongue against the roof of my palate prior to raising my phone up from the ground, directing the flashlight in front of me. But as soon as the scene in front of me became illuminated, the phone fell out of my hand with a loud thud, setting forth my worst nightmares in action. Shit. There, in the light coming out of my phone, I had seen a straw-stuffed figure leaning over an animal that suspiciously looked like a cat. The cat's belly was ripped open, and half of its intestines were hanging out of the stick frame's sewn mouth. I wanted to move back and run away the instant I had seen the gruesome scene, but my flashlight, the moment it tore its way through the darkness to reveal the deepest secrets the field had been hiding, had incited the creature's head to lift up towards me, and now it was staring directly at me through its button eyes. No one told me I was up against Harold's twin. To my surprise, the scarecrow was still staring quietly at me. I would have doubted his sight if it weren't for the fact that he was clearly able to see the light that had fallen on him. I can't underestimate him. Gritting my teeth, I tried casting a quick glance around to see whether I could find any escape. I almost let out a sigh of relief when I saw a small shed some distance behind him. There must be some kind of sharp equipment in there. I need to hurry. Not wasting another second, I tossed my sweater on the deadly still creature's face before sprinting in the shed's direction. I hope it works. Please let it work. Just as I finished sending a silent prayer up the heavens, rapid rustling of grass behind me reached my heightened hearing, making me work my legs harder. Hysteria, you bitch. He was using my worst fears against me, deliberately trapping me in places where I'd be forced to call him for help. My life was a mere circus for him, and he was the ringmaster, the one in control. I was definitely not an athletic person. I was good at hiding, but I hated being chased like a mouse. Moreover, these things were never this bold. Deep down, I always knew that they weren't going to kill me, but all that had become nil for tonight. I was running for my life, literally. My lungs were burning with the need for more oxygen as I continued pushing my limbs forward, shoving the long leaves out of face, a lot of their sharp, pointed ends and rough surfaces of tall stalks kept hitting me, cutting through my skin, making my crumbling exterior burn, along with my heaving insides, as I kept sprinting blindly towards the shed. The dense fields had started thinning by now. I could almost see the parted doors of the shed peeking from behind the tall grass, hindering my vision. The building was drawing closer and closer, nearly in reach, just about a couple of meters away. Yes! My right hand, fingers outstretched, was about to grab the handle when a slender straw-stuffed hand, covered by a leather glove, pulled me back from my hair, making me scream on top of my lungs. My scalp was burning as the scarecrow continued pulling my hair out of their roots, dragging me away from the door. Pressing my teeth hard into my bottom lip, I refused to scream or beg him. There was no point in it. Instead, I was scratching at his gloved hand, trying to let him go of the fistful of my hair. My legs were dragging on the ground, kicking hard, as I tried my best to stay rooted on my spot, but much like the corpse, the scarecrow was far too powerful for me to oppose. I knew from experience that kicking and scratching was not going to do me any good. Suddenly the scene where Hysteria had kicked and slashed the corpse's head flashed before my eyes. Is their head their weak point? I was not completely sure regarding my theory, but I needed to test it. And by the way, the scarecrow had almost dragged me back inside the core. I needed to do it fast. Looking around frantically, I tried to locate anything in near vicinity that I could use as a potential weapon when my eyes landed on a group of wooden logs lying nearby. I let my hold on his gloved hand loose, attempting to grip the rough bark, but I couldn't reach for it either. I can't die here. I can't. I was almost at the edge of the fields by now, close to losing all hope, when my defeated eyes met with the loose noose hanging around the scarecrow's neck, which I hadn't been able to see previously. Is it one of those hanged scarecrows? Gulping inaudibly, I lifted one hand to hold the dangling part of the rope, trying to be as discreet as possible so the scarecrow wouldn't notice my actions. Once I was successful in wrapping the loose end of the rope around my hand, I swiftly brought the other one near the knot, pulling the rope down to tighten the noose around its neck. The scarecrow immediately let go of my hair, gripping its own neck to free it from the rope. His one hand was wrapped around the tight noose, while the other one was slashing the air blindly, trying to cut through my skin. Not wasting another moment, I sprung up from position, kicking the scarecrow hard in its straw belly before sprinting again in the shed's direction. I didn't stop to look back at his condition. I was already stumbling up the stairs, running inside the open shed, picking the first thing that I could get my hands on. It was a pitchfork. Not caring about the consequences, I quietly hid behind the door, waiting for the scarecrow to enter through the door. Now, just as I heard angry feet dragging inside the small building, I swung the pitchfork hard in its direction with all my might, but I had clearly underestimated the demon. He was already anticipating it. Holding the blow off with one hand, he swiftly moved forwards to grab me with the other one. I had expected him to immediately snap my neck like a twig, but contrary to my assumption, the creature started inching closer and closer to me until its poorly sewn face was directly in front of me. He's trying to suck Hysteria's soul out of me. The demon was clearly distracted and vulnerable, and I knew for a fact that all his attention was fixated on my lips, which definitely provided me with an opening. My eyes slowly slid up the table, which he had pinned me against, my eyes traveling over the place where I had picked up the pitchfork from, eventually landing on a sickle lying nearby. This is my chance. I have to do it like he did. Recalling the event from my memory, I let my hand wander back, probing lightly over the wooden surface until it landed on a cylindrical handle made of metal. Go. With one swift blow, I had separated the scarecrow's head away from its shoulder. It fell down with a loud thud, but before it could turn into an updated version of the corpse, I buried the pointed corner of the sickle in it, lifting it up to smash it hard against the rough surface of the wall behind me, much like Hysteria had done. Right in front of my eyes, the scarecrow's body and head both evaporated into a thick black smoke. I did it. I couldn't describe the mixed feelings swirling around in me at that point. I felt relieved to some extent, but there was still raw fear buried inside its surface, as I knew that it was not the end. The night was still young. More of these were going to come after me. Sickle still gripped in my hand tightly. I passed the other hand through my messy, ink-colored locks, pushing them away from my sweaty forehead before turning to move out of the dark building. The moment I stepped out of the small shed, I saw a silhouette leaning against the wall adjacent to the door, his amber eyes giving me a scrutinizing look. My darling learns fast. Not wanting to indulge in his meaningless chatter, I avoided making eye contact with him as I started trudging silently towards the road, which definitely wasn't there before. Chapter 5. Cold night air was biting my exposed skin, leading me to push my clavicles inward in order to tuck my torso, barely covered by a flimsy tank top inside the cage of my arms. My trunk missed the warmth provided by my wool sweater, while my hand was itching to turn back and grab the sickle I had dropped near the side of the road to avoid drawing suspicious looks. The adrenaline rush I had been riding on for oh so long had finally went back to its normal level, leaving me behind, feeling more tired and anxious than before. My sneakers were producing weird, squeaky sounds. I dragged them along the rough pavement, I had been walking indefinitely for what seemed like hours. Raising my heavy eyelids, I glanced at the fancy, colossal hands of a round clock adorning the clock tower in front of me. It was way past midnight, 2 a.m. to be more precise. I could scarcely tell it by the way the crowd roaming the town square had leaned towards an adult audience with little to no children in sight. Multiple pairs of eyes were burning holes into my worn-out body, yet I wasn't affected much by them, as it was still better than the haunting eyes I've been seeing all night. Whether it be a decomposing one, a buttoned one, or burning embers. My first encounter of the night with that hideous creature had filled me with doubt, drilling it inside my head that I wouldn't be able to survive alone for the whole night. But the surprise victory I had stumbled upon in case of the scarecrow had eventually given me some hope. Hope that I wouldn't be needing someone else's help to ensure my salvation. Hope that I had miraculously become my own dawn. Suddenly, a chortling group of teenage girls dressed as witches passed by me, the loud noises urging me to turn my head towards them, immediately making me regret my decision as my wandering eyes landed on the jolly group, more specifically, the girl witch walking 2 or 3 feet behind them. She clearly was neither interested nor involved in the group's conversation. In fact, her eyes were trained right on me, unnerving me with her odd stare. Passing a quick glance at her group, talking nonchalantly amongst themselves, I moved my gaze back towards the lone girl, only to find her giving me a weird smile. That's when I realized she wasn't human. She was a real witch. It's okay. It's fine. Repeating the words for the umpteenth time in my head, I averted my eyes from her, keeping them trained on my brown sneakers, which once used to be white, trying to focus more on my next step rather than the queer witch staring at me. Right, left, right. Too focused on my drill, I was crossing the showcase window of a shop when the mannequin displayed in there jumped towards the glass and started banging against it as if trying to break it with her mere hands to reach me. Shit. Through sheer luck, I had managed to remain quiet at the unforeseen occurrence, saving myself from the addition of another embarrassing situation I had faced in public. But my feet hadn't been all that lucky. In the end, I had twisted my ankle in my attempt to turn away from the glass and had, as a result, bumped against the witch staring at me, making my eyes almost pop out of my sockets. I had no idea what to say or how to behave. I was opening and closing my half-parted lips in an alternate manner resembling a fish as I gawked at the uncanny existence in front of me with only one thing in my mind. Shouldn't have dropped that sickle. Here, for you. The witch tilted her black hat back, giving me a devious smile with her black painted lips as she all but thrusted an object in my hands before disappearing right before my eyes. My eyes widened as I rapidly turned my head in all directions, trying to see whether someone had seen it happen, but disappointment came all too familiarly when I noticed that no one had been able to see her, except for me. Mama! The hell? I had no idea that I'd been pressing something soft with my fingers until a creepy voice emerged from beneath my breasts, making me let go of the object immediately. Boo-hoo! I could definitely sense my soul leaving my body the moment I stepped back to peer down at the object that had fallen out of my arms and was now lying face front on the gravel near the sidewalk while producing mechanical, pre-recorded sounds of a crying child. Boo-hoo! Oh, God! It was one of the things that I hated the most after Hysteria, a vintage mama doll. No, please, no. The rendezvous with my little doll from childhood was still fresh in my mind. The night my doll had suddenly come to life and scared me to death. inciting me to seek refuge in a dark, damp sink cabinet for hours. It was the same night I had developed claustrophobia, along with a deep, dark hatred for dolls. "Mama!" Following the squeaky voice, the doll rotated its head back at an angle, impossible for a human. Its body was still laying face first on the ground, but its head had now turned towards me, staring me square in the eye as a creepy smile pulled at both corners of its plastic lips, making my blood freeze with horror inside my vessels. The newfound confidence which I had acquired after slashing the scarecrow had completely abandoned me, transforming me back into the child hidden underneath the sink, afraid of her most favorite doll crawling around her house in quest of her. I could hear the wild thumping of my heart, along with loud swooshing of blood traveling away from my face, draining all color from it. My mouth was getting drier by the second. My chapped lips were meshed against each other, getting heavily assaulted by meat teeth as I looked around hoping for someone, anyone to see the agony painted all across my face. Yet like my every desperate attempt to find refuge in other people, my sight came back empty-handed, bereft of any comfort. "Mama." The doll's tone had turned into a slower, more unnerving version of its previous childish voice, making me slowly take another step back from it. If I start running blindly, and it attacks me from behind like the corpse, it's game over for me. My wide-eyed gaze, fiercely searching for a suitable escape route, suddenly turned horrified as I noticed the doll missing from its original position. "Ma." The sound had come from just under my legs. Before I even had the chance to look down, a sharp pain shot up my foot, making me hastily jerk it back and forth in order to get rid of the source of my discomfort. If it had been possible for my eyes to get bigger, they definitely have, by the time I saw a little head full of blonde curls stuck to my ankle, its sharp teeth digging inside the skin above my ankle. Blood was furiously oozing out of the fresh wound, rapidly soaking my already dirtied sneaker in a messier crimson tinge. "Ah!" Numerous shrieks were tearing their way out of my mouth as I felt the doll's teeth digging deeper inside my flesh, almost grazing the bone. "The bitch is about to crunch my bone." The thought immediately set my body in motion, my crumbling defenses kicking in as I raised my leg high up in air before banging the side of my leg against the corner of the wall. I was trying to aim for Doll's head because I had a notion that I wouldn't be able to separate her from my flesh by merely pulling her fake hair out. "Get off already, you bitch." More and more people had started looking my way, probably questioning the death of my last 2 brain cells, as I, uncaring of their stares, continued smashing my bleeding ankle against the brick wall. After several wild kicks to its head, the doll finally landed hard on the ground with a small thud. The relentless banging had cracked its skull, yet the creepy smile was still lingering on its sickening pink lips as its dazed eyes stayed locked on me through all the ruckus. "Ma, ma." Its voice had turned much lower and thicker in comparison than before. It almost sounded like a male was talking to me. "I didn't give birth to an ugly creature like you. You hear me?" Several gazes were burning a hole through my back, but I didn't give a damn in that moment. My focus was set on the battered doll on the ground. I had let her win once. I wasn't letting her win again. "I want your head, bitch." That did cajole a couple of gasps from the crowd gathering around me. They couldn't see the doll. They probably couldn't see my bleeding ankle as well. I was going to do the same, pretend that they didn't exist. I was searching for something sharp to cut its neck, but when I couldn't find anything, I decided on detaching it from the trunk with my bare hands. Being careful of not going near her lips, I tried gripping her blonde locks, Yet she still managed to get a chunkful of the soft flesh on my hand, making me let out another wail of pain. All the pent-up anger from my childhood seemed to have been unleashed as I punched the little devil with my uninjured hand as hard as I could, deflating one side of its face, making it instantly let go of my hand that it had been munching on previously. This is for ruining my childhood. Not paying any attention to their horrified stares, as I had completely lost it, I landed another punch on the fake Barbie's face. And this is for making me claustrophobic. Another punch. And this is for ruining my sneakers? I must have looked utterly crazy, straddling air, delivering punches to earth. But in that moment, I couldn't care giving a damn. I was too contented with the visible results. The doll's face was totally ruined. After I was done letting my stream out, I grabbed the doll's body with my bleeding hand and its crushed head with another, and separated them with a forceful jerk before throwing them both far away. See you in hell. I didn't know I had been crying until cold air kissed my freezing cheeks, making me feel the tightness of my cheeks due to dried patches of tears lacing them. I was slowly returning back to my senses. The pain in my heart was intensifying more and more with every pump it applied to keep me alive. Lifting my hooded eyes, I stared at the small crowd gathered around me. One or two of them seemed to be holding their phones to their ears. Yes, near town square. Yes, she's standing right in front of me. My eyebrows furrowed as I realized what they were doing. They had probably called the police or some kind of crisis center for help. Gritting my teeth, I started walking away from the herd. Some of them tried stopping me, coercing me into thinking that they could help me, but I kept shoving their extended hands away, walking briskly to avoid an unwanted encounter with the authorities, slowing down only when I was sure that I had come far away from them. Pathetic. Trudging aimlessly for some time, I eventually found a desolate alley to rest my back. I couldn't walk anymore. The wound on my feet was making it more and more impossible to continue sauntering. Why am I so pathetic? Covering my eyes with the back of my forearm, I let out a gut-wrenching wail, followed by a series of sobs as I continued banging the back of my head against the wall I had been leaning on for support. Please, stop, please. Ma, huh? My eyes widened as my loud wails abruptly came to a halt. My reddened face was turning pale with fear as I let my forearm fall down into my lap gingerly, lifting my gaze, looking around me to detect a familiar head full of blonde curls. But as far as I could see, there was nothing remotely close to that in my surroundings. Ma. This time, the voice had come from above me. With my heart pounding in my ears, I slowly raised my head up. The first thing I was able to see were blonde locks dangling in front of my face before a battered, broken face of a doll, smiling down creepily at me, filled my vision. I wasn't even able to let out a scream from the shock when something heavy suddenly pounced on my huddled frame from above, tearing the skin of my neck with its mouth along with one of the major vessels resting underneath the tissue, releasing a spurting jet of blood that painted the wall behind me in a scarlet graffiti. She hadn't died. I hadn't seen her evaporating in smoke. I was finally able to see my mistake clearly, but it was far too late now. I had nowhere left to go. Even after miraculously avoiding this situation, I had nowhere else to go. There were people running after me, trying to lock me inside some house. It's the same everywhere I go. Barely able to see the wrecked doll hovering over my face, smiling triumphantly down at me, I turned my gaze to the side, refusing to look at her disgusting face, planning to suck Hysteria's soul out of my gasping lips. Maybe it's for the better. a small trail of blood had escaped out of my mouth, slowly trickling down the corner of my lips, joining the bigger puddle of blood that was furiously pooling on the asphalt present under my torn neck. Surprisingly, there were no tears leaking out of my swollen eyes. I had ran out of them. I had let it go. Black dots started appearing in my vision, coalescing as more and more time passed to create bigger blobs of blackness that were slowly devouring every inch of my vision. I was rapidly loosening consciousness, and I knew it wasn't long before I'd end up breathing my last. In my haze, my clouded vision was suddenly lit up with another presence filling it, a dark-clad figure leaning against the opposite wall, with his arms folded in front of his broad chest. I couldn't see clearly, but his skull-painted face was twisted in a frown as he continued staring wordlessly at me until I heard a husky voice ringing inside my head. "Call for me." The voice cocooned me into a warm embrace, much like the feeling you get when you return home after a tiring day. It painted a picture of a place that gave me a feeling of belonging. I didn't want to let it go. I didn't want to die like this, raising my bloodied hand towards the figure, my fingers twitching, itching for him to come closer. I tried motioning for him to reach for me, grab my hand, before everything went black before my sight. Hysteria. I could hear a slashing sound, sword cutting through air, accompanied by a loud shriek before everything went deathly silent. Is it over? Am I dead? I could see the light disappearing from my vision. The doors were getting closed. Everything had turned pitch black. My body felt light, its reins left in the hands of these merciless tides, drowning me deeper and deeper inside this unnamed sea of darkness. It seemed like there was no way out until a familiar pair of hot lips met my cold ones in a passionate kiss, bringing me back to my senses. Unlike before, they weren't trying to suck something out of me. Rather, they seemed to be breathing something into me, as if they were pouring their own life into me, sharing their energy with me, merging our completely different existences into one dynamic soul. The more these hot lips caressed mine, the more warmth returned to my freezing ones. The pain arising from the multiple parts of my body seemed to have completely disappeared. I couldn't feel any more of a warm, sticky liquid furiously pouring out of my wounds. The only thing I could sense in that moment was the feeling of a soft pair of plump lips lightly massaging my own, claiming me as theirs. Why? Because I love you, Gia. I was well aware of my benefactor. He had been my tormentor for over a decade, but the sweet taste of this comfort that I had tasted after a long time was too hard to let go so easily. He was the drug critical for my survival. I felt safe, and that was all that mattered to my tangled senses in that moment. As for the first time since forever, I slept peacefully after losing myself in the arms of Hysteria. Chapter 6. Clinking of wind chimes was the first thing my clouded mind registered. There were multiple ones, but strangely, neither did I feel any wind caressing my skin, nor did the whooshing sound of air made its presence known. There were only numerous strikers hitting the metal tubes, again and again, creating an unsynchronized symphony, which soon adjusted itself to create a definite tune, a tune much resembling to that of a musical box. Jack in the Box. Cold, freezing water suddenly made contact with my body, clearing my hazy mind immediately as my body jolted up of the ground it had been occupying previously. Oops, my hand slipped. Saucer-eyed, I looked at the source of the sound, only to find a grinning Hysteria, leaning casually against a wall behind me, holding a musical box in his palm. Just kidding. The sight of blood was making me nauseous. My sleepy gaze slid down my wet form to land on the rough concrete beneath me. Mixture of water and blood had made small puddles all around me on there. Blood. The events from before I had lost consciousness started flooding my mind, making me immediately look at my bitten arm and ankle. There were traces of dried blood on my skin, which had turned the puddled water under me into a small crimson pool. Yet there were no traces of injuries left. I lifted my left hand to place it at the junction of my neck and shoulder, patting to see the extent of the damage left by the cursed doll on my neck, but the pad of my fingers could detect nothing but smooth skin resting underneath them. It's gone. I'm healed. Sensing a movement out of the corner of my eye urged me to turn my head in that direction. The silhouette holding the music box had moved away from the wall he had been leaning against. Towering over my huddled form, his long legs were standing just behind me. I couldn't see him clearly due to the lack of lamination in the alleyway, yet his translucent amber eyes were glowing brightly, reflecting some invisible light that made his irises appear like a swirling lake of gold. My darling likes gold? Shut up. I couldn't believe I had eventually found the courage to say this to his face. Maybe the multiple near-death experiences had finally kicked in, wrecking what was left of my sanity. Darling. Large warm hands suddenly crawled up my damped tank top from behind, locking just beneath my heaving breasts, tugging me into a hard, sturdy chest. Don't you understand, Gia? They don't believe you. They can never accept you. For them, you're forever going to remain an outcast. His voice had unshackled the countless memories I had been suppressing for years, had kept them bound and locked into a cage deep inside my aching heart. Over the time, I had turned my chest into a cemetery, and these painful memories buried deep into it were the remains of my dead emotions, the horror written on my parents' face when I had narrated to them my yearly encounters with Hysteria, the pitiful look my shrink had given me when I had told her about my doll coming to life as the reason behind my hiding in the small cabinet, the bullying and humiliation I had faced in every institute of mine because of my unnatural breakdowns, the way I had been cornered all my life, never allowed to become the part of the crowd. Everything was coming back, washing over me like tides, washing over a defenseless broken flank of wood, trying to take it with them to the deepest, darkest parts of the sea. I had been running from place to place, trying to find an escape from those damned ambers, yet in the end, those ambers were the place offering me a solace from my tortured past. Come to me, Gia. Come, and I'll take care of all your pains. My hand, which had been dangling at my side all along, had started creeping up the leather-clad arms, slowly moving up to reach and hold the already clasped pair of hands in front of my ribcage. His touch had woken up those dead feelings. His words had stirred the graveyard of my heart alive. Embrace your hysteria. The man started placing butterfly kisses on the length of my neck, igniting a deep hunger inside of me. The hunger to be accepted, the hunger to be loved. I could feel the yes scratching my throat from inside, trying to find a way to crawl out and escape from my lips, and it almost did. It was on the tip of my tongue, ready to leave my mouth when the haze surrounding my head suddenly cleared as I saw the jack-in-the-box lying by my legs. No. Pushing his hands away from my small frame, I broke out of his embrace, whirling around to glare daggers at him. Stop playing games with me. But it is 2 hours before sunrise, and our little game is still on. His chalky lips had turned upside down in a small pout, making me fume at his audacious behavior. This is all just one big game for him, nothing more. I mean nothing to him. You're sick, and you're about to be, with those wet clothes. With a snap of his fingers, the water clinging to my clothes instantly dried out. If I hadn't known what this crazy-ass bastard was capable of doing, I'd have easily become fooled by his action, considering it a token of his care. If he cared this much, he'd have let me go. A plaything. What? My soft mumble had caused him to tilt his head to one side, letting his raven hair fall over one side of his head. A plaything. That's what I am to you, right? Biting my lips to stop them from trembling, I kept my brimming eyes down, staring at my bloodied sneakers. Darling, keeping my frown intact, I turned my heated gaze back in order to glare up hard at him, but found the place he had been sitting on empty. In a flash, he had materialized in front of me, causing me to whirl my head in his direction with a snap. But I immediately froze in my position when I noticed how close we were. Our lips were just a hair's breadth away. I could feel his hot breathing on my lips as he parted them to let his next words out. If this had been the case, then that poisonous little mouth of yours would have long been added to the list of my prized collections. Running the pad of his thumb on my bottom lip, he gently grazed his soft lips against my static ones. I love your lips, more so when they're joined to mine. It'd be a lie to say that his unusual remarks weren't doing sinful things to the butterflies in my stomach. I had never witnessed this side of him, and now that I had seen it, it had made captivated down to my bone. I've accepted your offer. I'll become your companion. Now, it's time for you to do the same. Liar? I had been tormented for too long to just let everything go in a single night. Staring for a moment at his extended hand in my direction, I shoved it away with my curled fingers, trying my best to not flinch at the contact my fingers made with his burning skin. So you've decided on continuing the game, Gia? I had no idea why I became more unnerved whenever he addressed me my name instead of his infamous endearment. Wait, game? I had almost forgotten about the stupid thing. Remember, I can't bring you back from dead, especially when there are humans involved. Humans? Was he talking about that crowd around the doll incident? Placing a finger under my chin, he tilted my head towards him, making me crane my neck to look up at him. The unforeseen serious air that had appeared around him had disappeared altogether. He was back to his crazy, playful self. Do you know who you're up against, darling? Pushing a lock of hair behind my ear, he neared his mouth to the side of my head before I suddenly felt something warm and wet running up my neck. He was licking my neck. Me. Just as he said that word, our surroundings started melted into a blob of nothingness, changing into a pitch-black room with no source of light, before small chips of color started replacing the dark background, merging together to form a bright scenario once again. The room we were standing in was empty of any objects. Its bare walls, along with its high ceiling, painted with the same color, red. Crimson paint was dripping down from the ceiling onto the floor and the walls, resembling strawberry syrup, trickling down snow-white frosting of a cake. But I knew better than that. This was no piece of cake. Slowly, Hysteria, who was still leaning down for the purpose of whispering in my ear, detached himself from me, allowing me to see his newly painted face. Instead of the black and white colors marring his flawless skin, a new addition of green, blue, and red had been made to his features, especially the blood red, which was currently sticking to the tip of his nose and stretching his plump, luscious lips into a wide grin. Darling, Tell me, what are you most afraid of? Over his shoulder, I could see a figure dressed in a red and blue silk shirt and a pair of bright yellow oversized pants. Similar to Hysteria, there was smeared fake blood on his chalk-white cheek, but his makeup hadn't been done with as much grace as the man looming over me. Adjusting his scarlet wig on top of his head, the clown was waving to me with something that hadn't been in his hands previously. A butcher's knife, his Polaroid camera nowhere to be found. Tell me, darling. Clowns. Chapter 7. The scene in front of my eyes was flickering between the dark alleyway where I had fainted due to blood loss and the newfound scenario of blood dribbling down white walls. Nothing seemed absolute to my brain, yet the two clown makeup wearing creatures stayed the same, the one farther from me proving to be scarier than the one closer to me. End this now, Gia. I'm giving you another chance. Come to me. I could swear I had seen a tinge of desperation in his burning embers, but before I could confirm my suspicion, it was gone as soon as it had appeared. No, never. My answer was absolute. I had decided that I was not going down without a fight. I had fought for years. I had been fighting the whole night, and I sure as hell wasn't giving up in the last hours. Final attempts count more when it comes to a race, because everyone starts with the same speed. Then go. I hadn't expected him to practically shout in my ear before pushing me towards an entrance of a big tent which had suddenly appeared there out of thin air. I couldn't get a good look at the entrance due to the abrupt push Hysteria had given me, but the quick glance I had been able to steal revealed something like a clown's wide open mouth instead of a proper door in front of me. Its wild hair were painted with a dirty green, two white bulbs resting in place of where its eyes should have been, while its jaw was hitting the floor in literal sense, providing the opening to the door lined by its several pointed teeth. I'm so screwed. It was the only thing going around in my head, but I had no other way to go. A cardboard killer clown seemed like a better option than a real one chasing me with a knife. Soon as I skidded inside, passing the blurry, colorful entrance, I was immediately met with a pitch-black screen. There was darkness awaiting me in there, a sea of endless darkness, trying to drown me from every direction. I couldn't even see my hand, even if I waved it in front of my eyes. Where the hell has he dumped me this time? Cursing him repeatedly inside my head, I continued sauntering inside the seamless path. There were no walls, doors, objects, nothing hindering my way, but I continued to move my hands in front of me, trying to avoid any expected collision. What's this? My hand had made contact with something smooth, its texture resembling that of a silk's. Grabbing the material between my index finger and thumb, I started rubbing it gently to get a better idea about it. When I couldn't form the picture inside my head, I tugged it towards me, but nothing happened. It seemed to have been stuck. What is he trying to pull now? The thought of Hysteria being included in the last level had annoyed me more than terrified me. The fear I had felt towards him was washing away with the darkness of the night, being completely replaced with another feeling that I couldn't put my finger on. Not now. The man had ruined my life. Maybe that was my way of dumping the blame on someone else. All my life, I had despised Hysteria for putting me through this undeserved trial, but if he had been telling the truth, then that meant he had been protecting me all along. The lines between truth and lies had reduced to a mere blurred border, and I was afraid the moment both these sides merged, the last string holding me at the brink of my sanity would break, letting me fall down a bottomless pit of hysteria. Gritting my teeth, I let go of the soft material, trying to sidestep my way out, but something hard was blocking my way. My hand had landed on a firm surface, covered by a smooth material, different than that of the previous one. Trailing my fingers down, I could feel some ridges beneath until my eyes widened with realization. The thing I had been holding onto was an ascot, and now I was trailing my hands down someone's sturdy chest, my fingers lingering on their abs. Hysteria. The name had automatically left my lips as I retreated my hand immediately, as if it were caught on fire. But before I could move my body away from him as well, a large strong wrapped around the curve of my waist, pulling me into the same chest I had been rubbing my palm on for the last minute. Got a good feel, darling. A dim red light had suddenly illuminated the room, much like that we see in a photograph developing room, revealing Hysteria's colorfully painted visage to me. At any other times, I would have been scared out of my wits, yet surprisingly, I felt comfortable, as if it was the place I originally belonged to. Say yes, darling. His deep, velvety voice, accompanied by his red nose, caressing the crook of my neck, brought my attention back to him. Get a hold of yourself, Gia. No, I had intended it to come out with more firmness, but the refutation sounded much weaker out loud. Kiss me, darling. He had started peppering a path up my neck by now. No. Darling, please. The urgency in his tone had almost made me let out a groan. He was driving me crazy. I could already see my defenses tumbling down before my own eyes, and if it continued for long, I wouldn't be able to resist anymore. Just as I was opening my mouth to reply, a loud bang resounded from behind me, sounding like the clanging of a metal door. Found you! Even without looking back, I could tell it was the killer clown I had seen at the foot of the alleyway. Is the demon imitating my worst fear? Why is it even talking to me? Do demons talk like that? Run, Gia! For the second time in the span of last hour, Hysteria pushed me towards an arbitrary direction, and instead of colliding with the wall in front of me, I ended up crossing a hidden door, only to see a girl standing at the other side of the door. She was bent forward to avoid a fall, giving a subtle peek of her cleavage, peeping from underneath a dirtied, blood-laced tank top. Her long raven tresses were all over the place, numerous tendrils hanging over her shoulder, framing her face as her big, doe-like eyes stared back at me with equal astonishment. I was looking at my own reflection, and it was not the only one in there. There were many. I was standing in a hall of mirrors. Am I in a carnival? The same carnival the clown had been talking about? But people could see him, right? How could they see him? Wait. A sudden realization made me freeze in my stance. He was talking to people, but none of them answered him, right? They were only looking at me. The clown I had encountered at the start of the night was a dark creature, and the information had become too much for me to digest. I need to get out, and I need something to attack him. He's bigger than me. Forcing my legs to walk faster, I desperately tried searching a way out of there, my movement only ceasing when my eyes found two other figures joining me inside the maze. Hysteria and the killer clown. Hysteria was signaling me with his fingers to come towards him, while on the other hand, the clown was licking the shiny, blunt edge of his blade, as if he were teasing me with my inevitable fate. Is this what it is? I have to absolutely choose between these two, death or hysteria. Screw you both! Shouting my reply out loudly, I turned the other way, attempting to creep away from there and find another way out. Just as I was patting all the mirrors in the room, a hand tightly clutched my wrist, jerking me towards a tall figure. I had anticipated it to be Hysteria, but the notion immediately left me as I saw an ugly-looking makeup-clad face baring its teeth in front of me. Its teeth aren't pointed. Why doesn't it look demonic? A cold, sharp object running on my cheek brought me back to reality as I focused my widened eyes down to find him tracing his sharp blade on my face. I tried moving back instantly, but the man folded my arm behind me, putting it close to my waist to trap me in. His hold was too tight. His fingers digging into my skin were nearly cutting my blood supply off. I wanted to take my time killing you, enjoy inciting every single scream out of your pretty throat, but it's a pity we have so little time left. Let me go! Where have you been hiding? I searched for you all night. What the hell is he saying? My eyes were looking everywhere, attempting to find anything to hit him with, but there was nothing in sight that could facilitate my actions. The quest to find something eventually came to a stop as a sharp, burning pain shot up the skin under my jawline, accompanied by some warm drops trickling down my neck, making me look down towards his hand in horror. The tip of his knife had traced a superficial cut on my skin, and the sardonic smile he was giving me narrated that he didn't plan on stopping on just this. The next thing I knew, the knife was coming for my shoulder. I have to fool him. I have to move back at the last second. Intending to deceive him, I moved back at the last minute, causing him to graze only a bit of the upper part of my exposed chest. He hadn't anticipated my quick reaction, which had clearly caught him off guard. Using his surprised state, I raised my leg to hit him with as much force as possible where the sun doesn't shine. A loud groan broke out of his red lips as his hold on the knife as well as my wrist instantly loosened. Not risking to waste another moment, I picked the knife up, plunging it deep in his arm before sprinting out of there. That'd buy me enough time. I should have severed his head just as I had done with the scarecrow, but the incident with Crawling Doll and my fear of clowns hadn't allowed me to stay there for long. I had to stall time, just until dawn. With that thought in mind, I kept running through the maze without sparing another glance back. Oddly enough, Hysteria had remained with me on this level. Even if I couldn't see him, I could feel his presence. My theory only strengthened more when all the mirrors I was encountering started becoming foggy. There were small arrow signs present on the surface of the glass, appeared to have been made by a finger. Knowing I wouldn't have a better chance at surviving against the man alone, without any object to protect myself with, I had decided on following the arrows. My main motive was to get out of the maze for now, with or without Hysteria's help. My scurrying feet abruptly halted in their track as I saw a black door coming into my sight. The Hall of Mirrors End looked like another similarly ominous route start. Should I go in? I didn't have much time to contemplate as a thudding sound resounded behind me. Is he already here? Without wasting another moment, I yanked the door open, rushing inside the unknown path. I was barely able to stop myself in time before I ended up tumbling down a series of slides leading into a huge ball pit. By huge, I mean massive in every meaning. I could hide myself in there quite easily, and no one would see me. Fumbling alone with the balls in it could take hours, which means anything could be waiting for me down there, hiding beneath layers and layers of radiant balls. What do I do? Looking back, I could hear a series of cuss words, along with some loud groans drawing closer and closer to me, causing me to clutch my hands into a tight fist. There's no other way. Biting my bottom lip in frustration, I hurriedly lowered myself down in the front of the slide before letting myself slip down the shiny surface. As I got lower and lower, I was able to see a door on the far side of the room, hidden partially by the balls. I just have to reach the door. Gripping the elevated sides of the slide, I opened my legs wide in order to stop myself from falling face first into the pit. I was somehow successful in halting my motion in a not-so-graceful manner. No one's giving me a medal for it anyways. It was flabbergasting how my brain could come up with a sarcastic remark in such a life-threatening situation. Maybe life-threatening had become my new normal. Reaching the bottom line, I stood up, pausing for a moment as I stared at the sea of soft balls, hindering my way to the door. Chewing on my bottom lip, I carefully placed one leg inside the ring full of balls. A breath I didn't know I had been holding in left my lips as I felt the familiar firmness of ground beneath my foot. Just some more steps. With my other leg following the same lead, I started shoving the balls out of my way as I pushed my legs to work hard against the friction provided by the balls. Suddenly, another rustling sound joined in the sounds, resounding through the vacant room, making my hand, which was halfway over to throwing a ball away, halt in its place. I'm the only one in here, no? Slowly, I turned my head to stare at the elevation that had formed behind me in the pit. It looked like someone underneath the balls was trying to stand. Run! Whipping my head back in record speed, I started working my legs harder and harder to reach the wooden door, but, similar to the whole night, things didn't seem to be going my way. The rustling behind me had increased with the same pace as mine, maybe more so. Without halting my efforts, I turned my head to look back, which didn't prove to be a very wise choice. The thing hiding beneath the balls had started moving swiftly towards me like a mole traveling underground, ready to pop out of the surface any moment. What in hell is that? Suddenly my shoulder collided with a hard surface, making me almost fall back before a warm hold gripped my arm, tugging me towards itself. Ah! Shh, it's me, darling. My body suddenly stopped thrashing around, my head still looking at the underground thing's direction, which seemed to have ceased upon sensing Hysteria's presence. Slowly, the raised part of the pit fell back to the surface again. How? I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from my own ears. Little demons get scared easily when they sense someone more powerful than them in the same vicinity. Are you a demon too? Don't insult me. Then what are you? A djinn? Hysteria. Suit yourself. Frustrated of him going round and round in circles, I decided to sidestep him, deciding to continue my venture towards the door, lest another ravenous being attacked me. Don't go, darling. For the umpteenth time in that night, Hysteria's big warm arms snaked around my waist, bringing me close to his broad chest. My eyes went wide with shock as I heard the pleading in his voice, which by now had become too eager to be ignored. Come with me, darling. There was a tug-of-war going inside my head. All my life I had hated this creature, yet now he was the only one standing by my side, helping me through the night. I wanted to trust him. After this many incidences, I really wanted to. But several doubts were holding that yes on the tip of my tongue. The main one being that all these creatures were Hysteria's doing in order to obtain my trust and trap me in his clutches. Say yes, darling. My eyes nearly popped out of my skull when he, without any notice, planted his hot lips on the corner of my mouth, grazing the skin there lightly without touching my lips directly. He had rendered me unable to think anything else. I wanted an escape out of this hellish life, and I was willing to accept a way out, even if it meant in the form of a deceptive entity of night. There you are, bitch! The angry voice coming from behind me stopped me midway, causing me to whip my head around, only to stare at the fuming killer clown already slipping down the slide. Run! My feet immediately obeyed the domineering command, sprinting towards the door, while my mind was still stuck at the pitiful look Hysteria had thrown my way for a quick moment. From "Run, darling, run," to "Run, Gia," and eventually landing on "Run," every ounce of playfulness seemed to have left him. Shaking my head to clear these unwanted thoughts, I focused back on the situation at hand. My fingers clasping the door handle, I yanked it towards me. It was difficult, opening the door due to the resistance produced by the numerous balls in its path, yet I somehow managed to open it after 2 to 3 wild tugs. The parting door revealed a dimly lit, narrow passageway, which looked like something you'd happen to encounter in a horror maze. A rotating room. Is it a circus-themed haunted house? It sure looked as one, but there were no people around. It seemed to be closed. Well, it's almost dawn. Passing a subtle glance at the railing attached on both sides of the passage, leading to a door with "Exit" written in bold on top, I dashed forward to reach it as soon as possible. Pausing at multiple points had slowed me down in comparison to the killer clown after me. It felt like déjà vu, reminding me the incident with Scarecrow when I was just about to reach for the doors. His hand had gripped my hair, but this time I was prepared. I slowed myself down deliberately, and the moment the clown let his guard down, I jabbed my knee back in his face, hitting his nose. A loud thud echoed around the empty room, making me think that I had been successful in my attempt, but all too soon, the short-lived happiness turned into pure horror when the kneeling clown immediately went for my ankle, causing me to lose my balance and plummet to the floor. Despite being injured, the bastard had remarkable strength. I had fallen face first on the ground, and much of the impact was absorbed by knees, arms, and chest, which had played a major role in knocking the breath out of me. I was sure it was going to bruise bad, only if I stayed alive to see the day. I was lying on my chest, trying to normalize my breathing, while the hand holding my ankle started pulling me back towards the killer clown. With my other leg, I tried kicking his injured arm, face, anything that I could, but it was far out of my reach. That's when I turned my head back a bit and noticed something that I had failed to see before. Blood was marring the silk costume near the killer clown's arm. Do demons bleed? My pondering was brought to an abrupt halt when I felt the clown's fingers digging hard into my skin, continuing to tug me closer. What do I do? How do I hit him? The gears inside my head were rapidly turning around. It was a bare room. I had nothing to cause damage. That's when I saw something on my way looking down. My bronze belt giving a subtle glow in the neon lights of the room. Staying on my bruising chest, I let my hands creep under the shade of my body, trying to untie my belt as fast as I could without making things obvious. I had been successful in the process. The belt was secured as a bundle in my hands, hidden by my torso, and as soon as I felt myself getting enough close to the clown, I swung my free leg over the caught one, turning myself swiftly before hurling one side of the belt hard across his face, hitting his cheek and nose with the metal buckle. A loud shriek echoed inside the room as the clown immediately let me go. I was about to get up and hurry towards the door when I saw the clown's knife lying around on the ground. What if it came after me again, and I didn't get a chance like this? With some thought, I picked the knife up gingerly, clutching the wooden handle inside my palm tightly. I'm sorry, but it's either you and me, and I choose myself. Raising the knife high over our heads, I was about to plunge the knife in the man's neck, but before I could shove it inside his flesh, his uninjured arm shot out to grip my wrist in a tight hold, wrapping his legs around me before using his weight to throw me off balance and switch our positions. Wrong move, sweetheart. You should have run. I tried wiggling out of his hold, but the clown had thrown all his weight on top of my small frame. It was impossible to even move him an inch. Is this really inevitable? Is there no salvation for me? Whatever I do, I'm doomed to die this way. Tears were leaking furiously out of the corner of my eyes as I stared at the clown smiling menacingly on top of me. Suddenly, his gloved hand started crawling up my ribs, making my skin crawl with disgust. What the hell is this demon doing? That thought was immediately answered when the clown suddenly clutched his hand on top of my ribs, digging his fingers on their way until his animalistic jabbing had drawn blood out of skin. Scream, bitch! I was too tired from the night to give him a reaction, so I slowly let my head fall to the side. I could see him. He was standing there, behind the clown, and no amount of paint could hide the real expressions adorning that beautiful face. He was worried for me. Call for me. No. The clown probably thought I had denied him the pleasure of my screams, infuriating him further as he landed a hard punch to the side of my ribs. I guess this is the end, my friend. Coughing out blood, I stared up at him with a little smile on my bluish lips. Jab him in his wound, huh? Straining my ears to hear more clearly, I gave him a puzzled look as he uttered the same sentence again. Jab his wound, Gia. Just as the man was about to land another blow on my ribs, my motionless body came to life again as I jabbed my nails as hard and as deep as I could in his arm, inciting a loud scream out of his disgustingly painted red lips. Wrong move, bastard. Should have let me go. Wasting no moment, I picked the knife he had placed at his side while assaulting my ribs. The position I was lying in wouldn't have allowed me to sever his head from his shoulders, so instead, I plunged the pointed end of the knife into the side of neck, doing the same thing that I had experienced before in the night at the hands of the crawling doll. I severed his carotid. Blood splattered everywhere, especially on my face as I was lying underneath him. It soaked my already dirtied, white-turned-brown tank top in a darker scarlet shade, while I begrudgingly pushed the heavy creature away from my frame. Should I cut his neck? Why is he bleeding red? None of them did. Don't, Gia. He was standing still over me, in the same position. Why? You'll regret it. I can't listen to him. He's hysteria. He's deceptive down to his bone. Gia, it hadn't evaded me that he wasn't calling me darling anymore. What now? I had crouched in front of the bleeding clown's body, contemplating my next move, when Hysteria's next words made me go blank all of a sudden. I love you. With that, he burst into several black butterflies, leaving me gaping after him. Hysteria? Suddenly the door opened, letting a stream of sunlight in, before a shadow appeared in the doorframe, revealing a teenage boy dressed in his sweats, yawning loudly. Who's there? It's not working, ah! His speech got cut midway before he yelled loudly, his eyes turning to saucers as he stared in an alternate manner between me and the bleeding clown. You killed him. You killed Jerry? Jerry? Wait, you can see him? Of course. I have fucking eyes. The boy abruptly put a hand over his O-shaped mouth as he realized what he had said to an apparent crazy killer. Me. Where have you been hiding? I searched for you all night. I was staring at the clown, and then at the boy, and then my gaze found its way back to the knife I still had tightly clasped in my hands. Like puzzles pieces coming together to form a definite picture, everything started making sense to me. Remember, I can't bring you back from dead, especially when there are humans involved. Hysteria was never going to reveal himself to me. He had always planned on guarding me through shadows, but he was forced to talk to me again only after my encounter with this killer clown, who had decided to make me his next target after I had insulted him publicly last night. Hysteria could harm similar creatures, but not humans. He couldn't get involved in our world until, or unless I asked for his help specifically, summoned him to me. This is why he had been playing these games all night with me. This is why he had let those demons touch me, harm me, to prepare me for the bigger danger that was awaiting me in the form of a human being. This is the reason he kept pleading me to let him help me. Don't you understand, Gia? They don't believe you. They can never accept you. For them, you're forever going to remain an outcast. Hysteria! Hey, stay there! Stay there! I don't know what overcame me as I started running in blind directions, screaming wildly on top of my lungs. Hysteria? No one was answering me back. I looked with crazed eyes at the half-opened door, making the teenage boy almost cower back in fear. He was on phone with someone, yet the only thing I could focus on was the sun rays sifting through the exit door behind him. Halloween was over. Yes, there's that crazy girl here that returns to Delight's every Halloween. She has committed a murder. Epilogue. Sitting at the edge of my single bed, my bony fingers fumbled with the corner of my sleeve, a habit I had recently developed. My legs were dangling down the side of the bed, and I was having a hard time controlling them from moving to and fro. I didn't want to accidentally hit the nurse, who had been checking my vitals for the past few minutes. All good. You've shown remarkable improvement, Gia. After all the mind drilling you guys put me through, wasn't it inevitable? I wanted to scream this in her face, yet I only nodded a bit in acknowledgement, my loose raven locks bouncing up and down with my bobbling head. They had lost their shine. My body was in a similar condition as well. I had lost weight. Deep dark circles were marring the skin around my eyes. My lips had become pale and chapped. The little amount of life that I had in me left me the day Hysteria disappeared. Put your hand forward, Gia. I want to see you consuming these. Don't fake it like last time. Smiling to myself, I let go of the cotton sleeve of my plain uniform, extending my palm in front of her. Martha. She was a nice, middle-aged woman, working as a caregiver in this asylum for the previous 2 years, 1 year before my admission in here. She had 2 little girls, both a handful. That was all what she had told me, in hopes of striking a conversation, in hopes of getting something out of me, yet she could never succeed. I never opened my mouth. I didn't talk to anyone. Fortunately, the man I had fatally injured was an infamous serial killer who had already killed 2 girls before me. My attempts at injuring him were considered as self-defense, but the little show I had put up in the town square, along with my frantic state in the morning, the teenage boy found me in the carnival, didn't really prove to be in my favor. I was made to go through different psychiatrists, but I was unable to provide any valid reason for my actions. I couldn't tell them why I was doing what I did. I couldn't tell them how I ended up in there. Nothing. In the end, it was decided for me to be put into a healthcare center. A fancy name for a mental asylum. My parents couldn't do anything either. My mom only cried whenever she came to visit me because I kept repeating the same words again and again. Let me go. Hysteria is waiting for me. I caused a fair share of ruckus in the starting months, but I had gotten better with time. They tried their best to brainwash me. I couldn't blame them. It was their job after all. There were long, long sessions of therapy, trying to make me believe that no hysteria existed in the real world. It was all in my head. Well, that's what hysteria does. You only know him as much as he decides to reveal himself to you. Maybe I'd have ended up believing them eventually if I didn't see a man with amber eyes standing in one corner of my room whenever I was creating a scene, tearing and throwing things, screaming as loud as my vocal cords allowed until a pair of nurses came in to hold me down while one of them injected me with a tranquilizer. Each time, the last thing I saw before losing consciousness was his silently pleading eyes. In those rare moments, I got to see a glance of him. He didn't have his face covered with ink markings like before. If it hadn't been for those beautiful ambers, I wouldn't have been able to recognize him. The beautiful pale man who stood in a corner of my room didn't talk to anyone, just stared. After months of injections and pills filled with sedatives, I had succumbed to their will. I had confined my life to this room. I had stopped taking the only name that I used to call, Hysteria. Come on, dear. Blinking back, I realized Martha had already placed the pills in my hand and was waiting for me to take my medication. Keeping gaze glued to my lap, I took the glass out of her hand before placing the pills at the back of my tongue, trying not to cringe at the bitter taste as I washed them down with the tasteless water. Sorry for hurrying you, Gia. It's just that I need to go back early this evening. My girls are waiting for me to return so they can go trick-or-treating. What did you say? If Martha hadn't used her great reflexes to catch the glass slipping out of my hand, it would have brutally shattered down into several transparent shards. Trick-or-treating, dear. It's Halloween. For the first time since I could remember, a small smile tugged at the corners of my lips, hearing the name of Halloween. I would have never thought that the ominous night could ever bring me this amount of joy. Happy Halloween, Martha. I could tell Martha was visibly shocked, maybe even freaked out by the smile gracing my dried lips. Happy Halloween, Gia. Collecting her things in a noteworthy speed, she was out of the door in record time. Ha! Letting out a sarcastic chuckle, I let my back hit the hard mattress, covering my heated eyes with the pad of my cold fingers. The room had suddenly turned quiet, too quiet. Welcome to my kingdom, darling. I was hearing this voice after a whole year, but it hadn't changed a bit. It was still as lively and playful as it was a year ago, and it was still stirring the strings of my heart as it had on the last Halloween. Darling, good girls shouldn't cry. I hadn't let out a single sob. My hands were covering my eyes, yet he had still managed to know that I had started crying. Come closer to me, please. Because it seemed like he was hearing everything I was whispering to my soul, by the way his voice had definitely inched itself closer to me. Big bad wolves love it. Not being able to control myself, I sprung myself out of the bed, almost throwing myself in the arms of the man leaning against my bed. He seemed to be prepared for it too, as the moment my arms wrapped around his strong shoulders, his big hands clutched the curves of my waist, catching me midair. How has my darling been? Shut up. You left me. Placing my head in the crook of his neck, I started sniffling uncontrollably as big fat droplets slowly trickled down the corner of my moist eyes, soaking the stuff of his tailcoat. I was here, darling. I never left you. I just couldn't reach you. You hadn't given me the permission. Sitting on my bed, He had lowered me down on his lap. I was practically straddling him. One of his warm hands had stayed locked around my waist, while the other one had started stroking the top of my head. I thought you'd never return. I still couldn't believe that I was in his arms. My hands were continuously rubbing the length of his back, trying to engrave his feel in my mind, trying to make myself believe that it was all reality, not what the workers had been trying to feed me for the past 1 year. How could I not? I had a taste of you once. It was impossible to keep myself away now. A year had passed, and it was by far the most difficult period of my life. Every single day was pure torture, a mixture of sobs, screams, mental breakdowns, and sleepless nights. But not anymore. Placing my hands on his shoulders, I detached my body from his, putting some distance between us so that I could stare straight into his eyes. Do you love me? I love you, Gia. The reply had come in a heartbeat. He didn't take any time to contemplate his answer. The surety was clearly visible in his eyes. Since when? Love doesn't give you a particular date or time. It just happens. Pausing for a mere moment, he pushed some stray strands of my hair behind my ears, his touch lingering on the back of my neck, rubbing it with his fingers. My soul had awakened your senses. You could see and touch things that others couldn't. At first, I only stayed with you to protect my soul until your body was powerful enough for me to suck it out of you without causing any serious damage. His eyes had started glowing in the dark, much like a cat's. But it all changed as I saw your struggles, your helplessness. The day you ran out of your first Halloween party, you were hiding behind the dumpster, crying out loud, asking for anyone to just come and make the pain stop. I hugged you for the first time then. My fingers clutched the fabric of his coat, fisting them in my hand as I looked at him with my eyebrows raised. I wasn't imagining it. There really was someone letting me cry on their shoulder. Yep, that was a lot of mascara for a vampiress, by the way. You ruined my ascot. I missed that teasing grin. I missed these soft lips. Bending forward, I quickly stole a chaste peck from his smiling lips, making them part in surprise. So, is the deal still up? I was trying my best to appear calm and composed, despite my embarrassment quite visible through the light shade of pink covering my cheeks. As sure as you are while choosing red lingerie. That earned him a slap to his shoulder. Ouch! It hurts. What have they been giving you? Hulk's steroids? It wouldn't be Hysteria if he wasn't being this crazy. Pressing my lips to hide the smile threatening to spread over my lips, I lowered my head, placing a soft kiss on his stubbly cheek before leaning the side of my head on the adjacent shoulder. Take me with you. For a moment, he didn't say anything. I could hear nothing except for my rapidly beating heart drumming inside my ribcage. Say something. Rustling of clothes reached my ears. His hold on my waist was tightening as he tried bringing me impossibly close to his frame, keeping me caged inside his arms for a moment too long before separating our perfectly molded bodies away from each other. As my darling says. He had sat up straighter and was peering down at me with his beguiling gaze. His ambers kept flickering between my eyes and lips. Kiss me, darling? It was me who had said this, trying to tease him with own words. I embrace my hysteria. Bringing my lips closer to his plump ones, I lightly grazed them with my mouth, inciting him to end what we had started a year ago. I love you, Hysteria. That seemed to be the last string of my sanity and his control, which my words had cut and tattered into several pieces. Without wasting another moment, Our lips met each other in a hungry kiss, much like how two people joined hands, held onto each other before jumping down a cliff into a lake. But this was no lake. This was a sea of hysteria